A Navi seal and dog stepped off a quiet snow trail, and the forest led them to a giant stone statue no map ever mentioned. One crack in the statue's frozen hand revealed a glowing gold core, like a secret heart beating under stone. But the real shock wasn't the gold. It was the warning carved into it, telling him not to call the wrong office. Then records started disappearing. Footage lost a clean minute, and a smiling protector tried to turn truth into a crime. His K9 didn't bite, didn't panic. He stood between the camera and his handler, choosing discipline over chaos. Because sometimes the miracle isn't thunder from the sky. It's the courage to bring hidden evil into the light. Where are you watching from? And what did this story make you feel? Please like and subscribe so we reach 1,000 subs for more. Northern Winter Light has a way of telling the truth. It doesn't soften edges or hide scars. It turns every drift into a blade of white and makes the air so clear it feels like breathing glass. Travis Kenner lived where that kind of light was normal, far enough north that the days could be bright and brutal in the same breath, and quiet enough that a man could disappear without anyone asking why he wanted to. He was 34, a former Navy SEAL who had learned to survive by being useful and by not drawing attention. Two instincts that did not always cooperate. Up close, his face looked like it had been carved by weather and decisions. Angular, rugged, a sharp jawline with no beard to soften it. Clean-shaven by habit and discipline. His eyes were cold blue-gray, the kind that watched first and reacted second, and his hair was cut in a modern undercut. Tight faded sides, a short textured top. Kept neat because anything else felt like letting the world grab him. He moved with the controlled athletic build of someone trained to do hard things quietly. Shoulders squared, posture upright, expression calm in a way that could read as distant if you didn't understand it was simply containment. He wore the same thing he wore every time he stepped into the world. A complete standard-issue green digital camouflage uniform. Matching blouse and trousers, properly fitted and fully buttoned. Cinched with a plain black belt and plain black combat boots. No helmet, no hat, no sunglasses, no eyewear, no tactical vest, no body armor, no gloves, no headset, no backpack, no weapon, no patches, nothing extra that would tell a story he didn't want strangers to finish for him. In a town like this, a uniform could draw stares, but it could also end questions. Travis preferred the kind of quiet that came from people deciding they didn't want to test what they couldn't label. He told himself he wore it for practicality. The truth was more complicated. Routine was a leash he could hold when the inside of his head tried to run. Beside him moved Riven, full-grown male Belgian Malinois, 4 or 5 years old, lean and muscular like a living spring under tight skin. His coat ran deep fawn to mahogany with a distinct black facial mask that made his stare look even more intense. His ears stayed upright like antennae, and his eyes were dark amber, focused in a way that didn't ask for permission. Riven wore a tan tactical K9 vest and a simple working dog collar. Nothing decorative, nothing soft. He wasn't the kind of dog that begged for affection or filled silence with noise. He stood alert and steady, mission-ready even when there was no mission, and he faced the same direction as Travis, because years of work had built a shared compass between them. The dog's discipline didn't come from fear. It came from understanding. Riven watched the world as if it were a map full of hidden doors, and Travis had learned slowly, reluctantly, that the dog was usually right about which doors mattered. That morning, Travis wasn't out here to chase adventure. He was doing what he always did after a night of wind and heavy snowfall, clearing the narrow, unofficial trail that cut behind his property line and curved toward higher ground. Not because he loved hiking, because people used it. Snowshoers, hunters, a teenager with a camera who thought the forest was a backdrop instead of a living thing. And a blocked path meant someone would climb over deadfall, slip, and end up cold and hurt in a place with no cell signal. Travis had carried enough bodies in his life to understand how thin the line was between fine and gone. Out here, Doing something small felt like paying a debt nobody had billed him for. He moved through the pines with the efficient calm of a man who didn't waste motion, bending to lift branches, dragging a fallen limb aside with the strength in his back, tamping down a drift where it had swallowed the trail marker. The snow squeaked under his boots in a high, dry sound. Sunlight filtered through needle clusters and turned the air into floating dust of gold. Riven did not behave like a dog on a walk. He didn't zigzag. He didn't search for rabbit tracks just to prove he could. He kept returning to the wind, nose lifting, then lowering, then lifting again, as if tasting layers of scent, the way Travis tasted risk. Twice he stopped completely, head angled, body still, and Travis felt an old tension rise in him. The familiar feeling of being braced for something that hadn't announced itself. "What is it?" Travis murmured, not because he expected the dog to answer, but because speaking to Riven kept his thoughts from speaking louder. The Malinois didn't look back. He simply held his focus, ears forward, and then moved on with purpose, as if the trail were no longer the point. Travis tried to ignore it at first. The mind loves to rationalize. Animals pick up strange smells, wind shifts, old instincts misfire. But Riven's behavior wasn't restless. It was precise. Every few yards, the dog slowed, recalibrated, then chose a new line. Travis's jaw tightened. He had trained in places where a wrong step meant a buried wire and a flash of heat. He didn't like being led by something he couldn't see. And yet, there was the other truth. Riven had saved him from small dangers, more times than Travis could count. A nest of wasps, a thin patch of ice over moving water, a stranger on a back road who smiled too long. The dog read the world, like Travis once read a briefing. Travis had learned to trust that reading, because not trusting it had a cost. When Riven finally stopped and refused to move, it wasn't subtle. One stride, then a locked stance, muscles set, gaze fixed into the trees to the right of the trail. The Malinois' posture tightened into that steady, obedient readiness, alert and calm at the same time, like he'd been taught to become a statue until told otherwise. Travis followed the line of the dog's eyes and saw nothing, just snow, trunks, shadows. "Riven," he said again, a little firmer, and felt his own pulse answer. The dog's nostrils flared once. Travis caught it then, faint but wrong beneath the clean scent of pine and cold, a thin chemical edge, like adhesive or treated fabric, something that didn't belong to living wood. It was so light Travis might have imagined it if the dog hadn't been a compass needle pointing straight into it. Travis exhaled through his nose, the way he did when he wanted anger to stay quiet. "Fine," he whispered. "Show me." Riven moved without yanking, guiding more than pulling, and Travis stepped off the trail into untouched snow that came up to his shins. The forest swallowed sound. Their footsteps became muffled thumps in powder. The air felt older as they pushed deeper, and the wrong scent grew clearer. Waxy, metallic, preserved, like something meant to last. They broke through a curtain of young spruce, and the world opened into a clearing so bright it almost hurt. Snow lay smooth as plaster, unbroken except for the shadows of branches. At the center stood something that didn't fit. A stone statue, enormous, looming taller than any man, half buried at the base by decades of wind-packed drift. It looked like a figure corrosion mid-gesture, one arm raised as if holding an object toward the sky. The surface was rough and pale, patched with ice and old lichen, with long strands of dead vine clinging to it like scars. It wasn't the kind of monument you'd see in a town square. It was too isolated, too forgotten, too wrong for a place where everything else belonged to weather and time. Travis slowed, eyes narrowing. His first thought was simple and practical: hazard. Kids wandered, hunters cut across. A cracked stone giant could shed slabs without warning. "Who put you out here?" he muttered, and the question landed heavier than it should have. Riven stopped at the edge of the clearing and sat, calm, grounded, watchful, eyes locked on the statue's raised hand. Travis didn't approach like a tourist. He circled wide first, scanning the snow for tracks, for dragged lines, for anything that looked recently disturbed. The surface was mostly pristine. No fresh boot prints, no tire marks, only the faint indentations of wind patterns and a deer trail far off at the tree line. That should have relieved him. Instead, it made him uneasy. Forgotten things didn't stay untouched unless something kept people away, or unless nobody knew they existed. Travis stepped closer, boots sinking with a soft crunch. The statue's raised hand was coated in ice, thick and opaque, wrapped around what looked like an abstract torch or emblem. The sunlight made the ice glitter. He could hear his own breathing, steady, controlled. He told himself this was just trail maintenance. Clear enough ice and debris so the thing wouldn't drop chunks onto someone later. "Just making it safer," he said, as if the forest cared about his intent. He reached up with bare hands, skin toughened by cold and stubbornness, and began to pry at the ice, careful and slow. The ice resisted, then gave with a sharp crack, sending small shards down like broken glass. Travis flinched out of instinct, and then forced himself still. He hated how his body remembered flinching. He kept working, using the heel of his palm to knock away a fragile edge, then lifting a loosened sheet of ice and setting it down gently. Riven didn't move. The dog watched every motion with the same quiet focus he'd bring to a door in a hallway. The second Travis touched the thickest ridge of ice, Riven's behavior changed. Not louder, not aggressive, just different in a way that made Travis's throat tighten. The Malinois rose from his sit and stepped forward one pace, then stopped, rigid. His ears angled toward the statue's chest, not the hand. His eyes flicked once to Travis's face and back, as if checking whether Travis understood what was about to happen. Travis felt it then. Not fear, not exactly, something closer to the moment before a truth breaks through denial. The air in the clearing seemed to hold its breath. Travis paused with his hand on the ice, and in that stillness he noticed a detail he hadn't seen before. A thin line at the base of the torch, like a seam hidden under stone texture. A seam meant design. Design meant intention. Travis swallowed and continued, slower now, as if the ice might speak if he listened hard enough. The ice fractured under his palm with a sound like a snapped bone. A slab the size of a dinner plate slid free, and beneath it the surface was not stone at all. It was metal, yellow, bright, too warm in color to be anything but gold. Sunlight hit it and exploded into glare. Travis froze, hand hovering an inch above it, as if touching it would set off an alarm. His mind raced through possibilities, paint plating, a weird mineral sheen. But the color had depth. The way light sank into it and returned felt dense, real. Travis's mouth went dry. He leaned closer and saw that the gold wasn't a thin layer on top of stone. It was solid, a core revealed through a broken shell. The statue, he realized, was a disguise. Stone on the outside, something else inside, something someone had spent real money and effort to hide in the most inconvenient place possible. Riven exhaled once, controlled and held his stance, alert and steady. He wasn't excited, he wasn't afraid. He looked like a dog who had been waiting for Travis to catch up to what the wind had already told him. Travis forced himself to breathe slowly. He stepped back and looked at his fingers. No glittering residue. No flaking paint. He reached out again, just enough to press the pad of his thumb against the exposed metal. It was cold, winter cold, but smooth where it had been protected, with the faintest pattern of machining or casting. Gold could be cold. Gold could be heavy. Travis pulled his hand away like the metal had bitten him. His first instinct was to leave. His second instinct was to document. His third, deeper, older, was the instinct that had kept him alive. If something is hidden this carefully, it's because someone is afraid of what happens if it's found. He leaned closer and saw faint markings cut into the surface. Not decorative scrollwork. Words. The letters were shallow and worn where ice had pressed them, but readable. Travis traced them with his eyes instead of his finger, as if touch might turn him into a thief. The message was blunt, like an order. Don't call the field office. Find the keeper of the ice lake. Travis stared until the sentence stopped being a sentence and became a weight in his chest. Field office. Not police, not sheriff, specific. Whoever carved this knew exactly which authority would bury it. Travis felt a bitter taste rise in his throat. The taste of being told to stand down. Of being told to trust the process. Of watching a file get closed because it was easier than admitting what was inside. He straightened slowly, scanning the clearing again. The snow still looked untouched, the sky still looked harmless, but the forest no longer felt empty. Riven's ear twitched and the dog's gaze shifted. Not to the statue, not to the trees ahead, but upward. Travis followed the line and saw it. A small, dark dot high on a pine trunk at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't a pine cone. It wasn't a knot in the bark. It was too round, too placed, too deliberate. An eye, an aperture, something that could reflect light if the angle changed. Travis felt the hair on his arms rise under his sleeves. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He didn't give the watcher the satisfaction of knowing the watcher had been seen. He simply turned his head a fraction toward Riven. The Malinois stood facing the same direction as Travis, posture focused and obedient, mission ready in the most quiet way. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just held steady, dark amber eyes intense, as if he had known from the beginning that the statue was not the only thing waiting in this clearing. Travis's calm expression stayed on his face because it was the only armor he was allowed to wear. Inside, something cold and clear settled into place. The discovery wasn't an accident. The message wasn't for just anyone, and the forest, bright and beautiful under the sun, suddenly felt like a room where someone else had been standing in the corner the whole time. Travis Kenner did not sleep like a civilian. He lay still in the dark until morning came, listening to the house settle, counting the small sounds most people ignored. The tick of heat in the pipes, the faint creak of wood as cold tightened it, the far-off hush of wind combing the pines. A man could tell himself he'd retired, that the war was behind him, that the quiet up north had scrubbed the salt and smoke out of his lungs. His body didn't believe lies that polite. When dawn finally turned the curtains pale, Travis rose without a yawn, washed his face with cold water, and stood in front of the mirror, long enough to see the same controlled expression looking back. Calm, composed, authoritative on the outside, and locked tight on the inside. He buttoned his green digital camouflage blouse to the collar, smoothed it down like a ritual, and laced his plain black combat boots with the patient efficiency of someone who had learned that careless knots became injuries later. Riven watched from the threshold of the kitchen. Tan tactical vest already on his lean, muscular frame, black mask making his dark amber eyes look even more intent. The Malinois was full-grown, 4 to 5 years old, and he held his posture like a professional. No pacing, no whining, just steady focus, ears upright, body angled toward the door as if the day had already been briefed. Travis didn't give the dog a speech. He didn't need to. He clipped the simple working dog collar, grabbed a small kit, headlamp, soft brush, a roll of tape to mark his own tracks, a few evidence bags he kept for emergencies, even though he told himself he'd never need them again, and stepped out into the bright bite of northern air. The snow glared, clean and sharp, and the world looked innocent in a way that felt offensive. Innocent places didn't leave messages carved for strangers. He didn't take the trail the same way he had yesterday. He approached wide, doubling back once. leaving a deliberate pattern in the snow so he could tell later what was his and what wasn't. Riven stayed close at heel, matching Travis's pace, facing the same direction, the dog's breath controlled and quiet. As they moved through the pines, Travis replayed the words in his head without letting his face change. Don't call the field office. Find the keeper of the ice lake. He hated that it sounded like an instruction. He hated even more that it sounded like someone who knew the local machinery of authority well enough to name the right door to avoid. In his world, the wrong door got people killed. The clearing appeared like a hard white wound in the forest. The stone statue stood exactly as it had, massive and still, its surface patched with ice and lichen, dead vines clinging to it like an old story trying to stay attached. In the daylight, the exposed metal in the raised hand looked almost unreal, too bright, too warm against the cold palette of snow and pine. Travis stopped at the edge and scanned every tree line, every shadow, every possible angle where an eye could hide. He didn't look up at the same pine where he'd noticed a dark dot yesterday. He refused to give any watcher the satisfaction of being acknowledged. Instead, he used the side of his vision and the discipline of pretending he didn't care. Riven sat without being asked, steady and alert, eyes not on the statue now but on the ground near its base, as if the dog's instincts had shifted from look to read. Travis moved in slow, deliberate steps, careful not to disturb what he didn't have to. He placed thin strips of tape beside his own boot prints, small markers that would let him reconstruct his path later. The statue's hand was partly cleared from the day before, and the seam he'd noticed was clearer now. The stone, around the gold, wasn't natural rock at all. Up close, the texture was too uniform, too intentional, like cast concrete or a composite made to mimic granite. Travis brushed away powdery ice with the soft brush, avoiding direct contact with the exposed metal. He wasn't stealing, he wasn't harvesting, he was documenting a problem, the way he'd documented danger in places the world pretended didn't exist. He angled his headlamp beam across the gold at a shallow angle, and the letters stood out more clearly. Don't call the field office. Find the keeper of the ice lake. The message wasn't poetic. It was practical, the kind of warning written by someone who had learned the cost of trusting the wrong uniform. Riven shifted, nose dropping to the snow along the statue's shadowed side. The dog's body language tightened into focused work. No frantic digging, no playful curiosity. He moved in a slow line, sniffing, pausing, sniffing again, as if following a thread you couldn't see. Travis watched, throat tight. What do you have? He murmured. Riven stopped at a patch of snow near the statue's rear and huffed softly. One controlled breath, not a bark. Then he looked up at Travis for a half-second, eyes intense, and returned his attention to the ground. Travis crouched, careful, and noticed the faintest change in the snow texture. A slightly compressed strip, too straight to be wind. Someone had been here with purpose. Not yesterday, not last week. Recent enough that the edges weren't rounded by weather. Travis felt a cold, clean line draw itself down the center of his spine. He hadn't been the first to find this, or he was the first to find it after someone else had checked that it was still waiting. He didn't open anything. He didn't pry further. Instead, he documented photos from multiple angles, wide shots to capture context, close shots of the seam, the lettering, the surrounding snow. He noted the smell, too. The faint, waxy scent Riven kept circling back to, like treated fabric or old preservative. That smell didn't come from stone. It came from intent. Travis stood and stepped back, eyes scanning the trees again. The air was bright and the clearing was quiet in the way quiet places sometimes were right before they stopped pretending. On the way home, he took a different route, cutting across a ridge where the snow was thinner and the wind louder. He wanted to see if anyone followed. Riven stayed glued to his side, posture mission ready, ears sampling everything. Halfway down, Travis paused and turned as if adjusting his boot. In the corner of his eye, he caught it, a glint far behind him where there shouldn't have been glint, a flash that could have been sun on ice, except it held for a fraction too long, like a lens catching light. Travis didn't stare. He didn't freeze. He simply kept moving, and his calm, composed expression stayed locked on his face, like a mask he'd worn for years. Inside, his thoughts sharpened into a single sentence. "You're not alone out here." He reached his cabin by late afternoon. It sat back from the road, small and solid, built to survive winters and silence. Travis stepped onto the porch and stopped. The snow near the steps was disturbed in a way it hadn't been when he left. Subtle, but real. A shallow tire track near the road edge where no one should have pulled off. A faint imprint of a boot near the far corner, already dusted with new powder, as if someone had counted on weather to erase their visit. Travis's jaw tightened. Riven's posture changed instantly. The Malinois moved half a step in front of Travis, body angled sideways in a protective block, eyes fixed on the door as if he could see through wood. Travis didn't reach for a weapon because he didn't carry one, and because the point of this kind of threat wasn't a break-in. It was a message. He inhaled slowly, then opened the door. Nothing looked disturbed inside. No drawers open, no obvious chaos. That was worse. People who wanted to steal made noise. People who wanted to be felt left no fingerprints on the surface. Travis closed the door behind him and stood very still, letting his senses do their work. He smelled coffee grounds, bean from the firewood rack, the faint, clean scent of detergent, and underneath it, something else. A thin chemical note, faint as an insult. Riven moved through the living room with controlled precision, nose low, tracking the scent in a small arc that brought him to the front window. The dog stopped and stared out at the trees beyond the glass, ears forward, body steady. Not alarm, confirmation. Travis forced himself to do normal tasks. He made coffee, he fed Riven, he cleaned the brush and kit, placed everything back where it belonged. He told himself that routine was control. But his mind kept circling the message in the gold and the compressed snow behind the statue. Who is the keeper of the ice lake? Is it a person? A role? A warning disguised as a name? He tried to picture the local agencies, the layers of authority up here. Forest Service, field offices, county deputies, contractors. The more he thought, the more he understood why someone would carve a warning not to call a specific office. The right office could make a discovery disappear with paperwork. Travis had seen paperwork bury bodies without ever touching soil. That night the wind rose. The pines hissed. Travis sat at his small table with the radio he kept from his old life. It wasn't fancy, just a rugged piece of gear meant to survive salt air and rough hands. He didn't turn it on for entertainment. He turned it on because his instincts hated unanswered questions. The speaker crackled with distant noise, the low murmur of static and half-caught transmissions. He adjusted the dial slowly, not expecting anything. Then, between one dead channel and another, a phrase cut through like a blade sliding under a door. "Don't let them close it again." The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was almost calm, which made Travis's stomach drop. He froze with his fingers on the dial, eyes on nothing. It could have been a coincidence. A fragment of someone else's conversation. A bleed from an old repeater station, hidden somewhere in the hills. But it landed in his chest with the weight of personal history. Close it again. Those words didn't belong to random radio chatter. They belonged to a system. A cover. A decision made by someone behind a desk, far from the cold consequences. Riven, who had been lying quietly by the stove, lifted his head the moment the phrase came through. Not when the radio crackled, Not when Travis touched the dial, only at that sentence. The dog rose, walked to Travis with slow certainty, and pressed his muzzle against Travis's left thigh, exactly where Travis's pocket sat, the pocket that held his phone and the small notebook he'd used to mark the statue's details. Riven stayed there, breathing steady, not demanding attention, not asking for comfort. It felt like the dog was anchoring Travis to something real, pulling him back from the old reflex to dismiss a signal as noise. Travis looked down at the Malinois' black-masked face and saw no fear, only insistence, the quiet conviction of an animal that couldn't explain why but knew the difference between harmless sound and a warning. Travis's throat tightened. He reached down and rested his hand briefly on the dog's vest. The fabric was warm under his palm, the only warm thing in the room. For a moment the impulse to run, to cut ties, to pretend he'd never seen gold was in him like panic. Then it passed, replaced by a colder truth. Riven wasn't reacting to the radio. He was reacting to what the radio meant, and someone out there knew Travis had heard it. Travis turned the radio off. He didn't like games he couldn't see. He stood at the window and watched the darkness outside as if his stare could carve back. Snow drifted through moonlight in slow spirals. The world looked peaceful. Peace was sometimes camouflage. Riven returned to the window and stood beside him, facing the same direction. Posture alert and steady. Travis didn't speak. His mind began building a plan, the way it always did when threat entered the room. Document, duplicate, don't trust a single channel. If this was manipulation, it would get worse when he tried to ignore it. If it was a clue, it would become dangerous when he followed it. By morning, the sky was pale and clear again. Travis stepped outside and found the porch empty except for one thing placed with deliberate care. A plain envelope, not wedged, not hidden, sitting centered on the top step as if it belonged there. No stamp, no return address. The paper was clean. Too clean for a place that smelled like wood smoke and snow. Travis didn't pick it up with bare hands. He put on thin kitchen gloves, improvised but better than nothing, and lifted it by the corner. Riven stood at his side, muscles taut under his vest, eyes locked on the tree line. Travis opened the envelope and slid out a single photograph. High resolution, telephoto, taken from a distance. It showed him in the clearing yesterday, one hand near the statue's raised arm, Riven at his side. Both of them caught mid-moment in bright snow. The angle was slightly elevated, as if shot from the slope or from a hidden perch in the trees. There was no note, no threat written in ink. The threat was the image itself, evidence that someone had been close enough to watch, careful enough to remain unseen, and patient enough to let Travis do the work. Travis stared at the photograph until the edges of it began to feel like a cut. He didn't crumple it. He didn't throw it away. He folded it once and placed it in his pocket, with the same careful respect he'd once given orders he didn't like. His calm expression didn't change. But inside, something shifted from uneasy curiosity to certainty. This wasn't about a random monument. This wasn't about treasure. This was about control. Who controlled information? Who controlled fear? Who controlled the story people would be allowed to tell? Travis looked down at Riven. The Malinois met his gaze, dark amber eyes steady, obedient, focused. The dog didn't need a command to understand the new reality. He was already in it. Travis stepped off the porch into the bright snow, the envelope now empty in his hand, and looked toward the forest where the statue waited. The day was beautiful. The kind of beauty people posted online to prove a place was safe. Travis didn't feel safe. He felt chosen, and he hated how familiar that feeling was. Travis Kenner drove into town with his hands relaxed on the wheel and his jaw locked like stone. The road along the lakeshore looked harmless in the bright northern morning. Snowbanks carved clean by plows, Penson standing tall and orderly, sunlight turning the frozen water into a sheet of pale steel. It was the kind of beauty people trusted too easily. Travis didn't. Beauty had never meant safe in his life. Sometimes it was just camouflage with better lighting. Riven rode in the passenger seat the way he always did. Full-grown Belgian Malinois, lean muscle held tight under a tan tactical vest, black mask making his focused dark amber eyes look almost severe. The dog sat steady, upright ears sampling everything, posture mission-ready, even when the world tried to pretend it was only a small-town morning. Travis had folded the photograph from the porch and put it away, not because he wanted to forget it, but because he refused to give it power by staring at it. He had made one decision in the night without drama. He would not call any office named in that carved warning. Not until he understood what kind of machine he would be stepping into. Instead, he would do what he'd always done when the official route felt poisoned. He would ask the people who lived under the system, the ones who knew where the rot usually hid. He parked near a gas station with a single pump island and a hand-painted sign that promised coffee like it was a civic virtue. Inside, the air smelled of gasoline, cinnamon gum, and overheated heater vents. A young clerk with pale freckles and tired eyes glanced up, took in Travis's uniform, then flicked to Riven and backed down quickly, as if eye contact might invite a question he didn't want to answer. Travis kept his voice calm. "I'm looking for someone people call the keeper of the ice lake," he said, as if he were asking for a trailhead. The clerk blinked, face blank. "Never heard of it," he said too fast. Travis nodded like that was fine, bought a bottle of water he didn't need, and left without pressing. He knew the shape of fear when it lived inside politeness. Outside, the sunlight felt almost too bright, like the world wanted everything visible. Travis scanned the street anyway. A diner with frosted windows, a small bait and tackle shop, a community notice board with curling flyers. He kept his posture upright, composed, authoritative, the way he had been trained to carry himself so nobody could see how hard his mind was working. He tried the diner next. The bell over the door chimed softly. Warm air hit him along with the smell of bacon grease and lemon cleaner. An older waitress with ash-blonde hair in a tight bun and forearms corded with the strength of decades carrying trays looked at him with mild suspicion that softened when she saw Riven's controlled stillness. "Coffee?" she asked. Travis nodded. He didn't sit with his back to the room. He chose a booth where he could see both the door and the windows, not because he expected a gunman, but because he expected a watcher, and watchers loved blind spots. When the waitress returned, he asked again, gentle, almost casual. "Ice Lake, keeper of it. That ring any bells?" Her mouth tightened. Not angry, measuring. "People say lots of things when they've been stuck here long enough," she said. "Some names are jokes." Travis kept his eyes on her face, the way he'd learned to read micro cracks in a lie. "And some aren't," he said. She set the mug down harder than necessary. "Try the bait shop," she muttered, then walked away like she'd already said too much. Riven remained still, gaze following her only long enough to confirm she wasn't a threat, then returning to the room's corners. Travis hated how comforting that was. He hated even more that it meant his own senses weren't enough anymore. The bait shop smelled like damp rope, wood shavings and minnows, and a man behind the counter, mid-40s, bulky, beard thick and untrimmed, looked Travis up and down and immediately tried to make the conversation small. "You lost?" he asked with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Travis kept his voice neutral, looking for a person or a title, keeper of the ice lake. The man's grin faltered. His gaze flicked to the window, as if checking whether anyone was watching him answer. Then he shrugged, too big. "Never heard it," he said. Travis didn't push. He thanked him and walked out, and on the sidewalk, under sunlight that should have felt clean, Travis felt the wrongness like grit in his teeth. People were refusing the phrase with the same rhythm. Too fast, too flat, too rehearsed. That wasn't ignorance. That was avoidance. Riven's ears angled toward the far end of the street where a county vehicle sat parked beside the ranger station, its windshield catching light. The dog's body didn't tense into aggression, but he became even more still, as if his instincts had singled out the only door that mattered. Travis exhaled slowly. "All right," he murmured, more to himself than the dog. "We do it direct." The ranger station was small but solid, built like it expected Winters to test it. Inside, the air smelled of wet wool and paperwork. A woman behind the counter looked up with the kind of expression that had been hardened by years of tourists asking dumb questions and locals asking dangerous ones. Ranger Morgan Ashford was in her late 30s to early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered in a way that suggested she spent more time in snow and brush than in gyms. Her skin was weather-tanned, cheekbones high, and her eyes were a clear gray-green that didn't waste time on warmth. Dark hair was pulled into a low, tight knot at the base of her skull. Practical, controlled, no loose strands for the wind to grab. Her uniform wasn't flashy, a heavy field jacket in dark green, dark cargo pants, insulated boots, a radio clipped high, and an ID badge that sat like a small shield. She looked Travis over, taking in the standard-issue digital camouflage and the calm authority in his posture. Then her gaze dropped to Riven. She didn't smile, but something in her expression shifted. Recognition of competence, and of the trouble that competence sometimes attracted. "Can I help you?" she asked. Travis kept it simple. "I found something off-trail. I'm trying to identify it without setting off the wrong chain of calls," he said. Morgan's eyes narrowed a fraction. "That's a strange way to introduce yourself," she said. Not hostile, just blunt. Travis didn't flinch. "I've had strange mornings," he replied. He didn't mention gold. He didn't mention the warning carved into metal. Instead, he offered the least dangerous truth. "There's an old structure in the woods. A statue. Looks like it was part of a project that never finished." Morgan's expression changed in a way that was almost too fast to see. Her jaw tightening, her eyes focusing as if a file had opened in her head. "Where?" she asked. Travis gave general directions, careful not to hand her a map anyone else could intercept. Morgan listened, and when he mentioned the phrase, "keeper of the ice lake," her mouth went still. Not confusion, not curiosity. The look of a person who has heard a story whispered, and always hoped it was just that. "Who told you that phrase?" she asked. "No one," Travis said. "It was connected to what I found." Morgan held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned her radio down a notch without speaking, a subtle gesture that told Travis she didn't want the room listening. "You want answers without turning it into a circus," she said. "You go to the archive." Travis blinked once. "Archive?" "Community records," she said. "Not everything lives in government servers. Some things live in basements because that's where people put what they don't want to explain." Her eyes flicked to his uniform. "You should understand that." Travis did. He hated that he did. Morgan came around the counter, movements efficient, and nodded toward the door. "Come on," she said, "and keep your dog close." Riven walked at heel without being asked, calm, focused, obedient, a shadow with muscle. The community archive was attached to the small library 2 blocks away. It looked friendly from the outside. Brick, warm windows, a little flag snapping in the wind. Like a place that existed to make a town feel civilized. Inside, the air was warmer than the ranger station and smelled like paper dust and lemon cleaner. A man met them near the front desk as if he'd been expecting Morgan more than Travis. Noah Kittredge was in his late 50s or early 60s, thin in a wiry way that came from moving boxes instead of lifting weights. His hair was silver gray and slightly unkempt, like he ran fingers through it when thinking. He wore glasses with dark frames and a cardigan that had seen better decades. His face had the patient lines of someone who spent his life listening to stories, but his eyes were sharp, the kind that noticed when a detail didn't belong. "Morgan," he said, voice low. Then his gaze slid to Travis. "And you brought company." Morgan didn't waste time. "He found something," she said. Noah's eyebrows lifted. "Everyone finds something up here," he said softly. "Usually it's just a reason to drink." Then his eyes dropped to Riven, and something like respect flickered across his face. "That's not a pet," Noah murmured. Travis kept his tone neutral. "He's not," he said. Noah nodded once as if that answered more than the words. He led them through a staff door into a back room that felt colder, more honest. Metal shelves, file boxes, cabinets with faded labels. The past stacked in dull gray. Noah moved with the careful energy of a man who knew exactly where stories were buried. "What kind of statue?" he asked. Travis chose his words like stepping stones. "Large, composite or cast, not natural stone. Looks like a cancelled monument." Noah's mouth tightened. "Cancelled is a polite word," he said. "There was a project decades ago. Commemoration, that's what they called it. People in town said it would put us on the map." He snorted quietly. "It put a few people on new mortgages." Morgan crossed her arms. "Northlark," she said. Noah nodded. "Northlark Works, contractor outfit. They had a yard on the far side of the lake until the fire." He said the last word like it had teeth. "Officially, accident. Unofficially, convenient." He pulled a drawer open and began flipping through folders with practiced speed. "Most of the files are thin. Things go missing when they get embarrassing." Travis kept his eyes on Noah's hands, feeling his own pulse settle into that old operational calm. He wasn't afraid of paper. He was afraid of what paper could hide. Riven, who had been still beside Travis, suddenly moved. Not toward a person, toward a cabinet in the corner that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The Malinois crossed the room with quiet, deliberate steps and stopped in front of the cabinet's bottom drawer. He lowered his head and sniffed once. Slow, then froze. No pawing, no whining, just a focused stillness that made Travis's skin prickle. Noah paused mid-page. Morgan's eyes narrowed. "What's he doing?" she asked. Travis didn't pretend certainty. "He's found something," he said. Noah approached, cautious but curious, and knelt with a grunt that betrayed his age. "That drawer hasn't been opened since before the last snowmelt," Noah said. Morgan shot him a look. "How do you know?" Noah tapped the dust line. "Dust is honest," he said. Then he pulled the drawer open. Inside were old photo envelopes, a few memos, and a thick manila folder with a faded stamp. Northlark, Miss C. Incidents. Noah's expression changed, subtle but real. "Well," he breathed, "that's interesting." Travis felt his chest tighten. The dog hadn't found random paper. He'd found the one file the room itself seemed to avoid. Noah slid the folder onto a table and opened it carefully, like it might bite. Inside were black and white photographs of a work site in winter. Men in heavy coats, scaffolding, and unmistakably the silhouette of a giant statue in mid-construction. Morgan leaned in, eyes hard. Noah flipped deeper. A typed note fell out, edges curled, ink faded. "Core shipment. Special handling. Do not log in public manifest." Travis's mouth went dry. He didn't touch the note. He simply read it as if reading it could stain him. Then Noah found a photograph that made Travis's breath catch. A close shot of the statue's raised hand holding an emblem. Even in grainy monochrome, the shape matched what Travis had seen. And behind the hand, a chalk mark on the scaffold. A crude symbol that looked like a lake with a line through it. And, beneath it, handwritten, "Keeper." Travis felt something cold settle in his gut. "That phrase," Morgan said quietly, It's older than you. Noah nodded, eyes flicking between them. People used it like a joke, he said, or like a warning. Depends on who was listening. Travis's mind tried to assemble a map out of fragments. A statue project. A secret core shipment. A file buried in dust. A phrase carved into metal that told him not to call specific office. Before he could speak, the bell at the library entrance chimed again. Noah looked up sharply. Morgan's posture tightened. Footsteps came down the hall, measured, confident, too controlled for a casual patron. A man appeared in the doorway with the kind of smile that arrived before warmth did. A Preston Vale looked like he had been built for boardrooms and photo ops. Late 40s to mid-50s, tall and lean, hair dark blonde, combed back neatly, face sharp in a practiced way, high cheekbones, narrow jaw, skin too well cared for to belong to a life outdoors. He wore a dark overcoat that fit perfectly at the shoulders and gloves thin enough to be expensive, with shoes far too clean for slush. His eyes were a pale gray that measured distance and risk before they measured people. "Ranger Ashford," he said, voice smooth, polite, as if they'd bumped into each other at a charity luncheon instead of a backroom archive. Morgan didn't smile. "Mr. Vale," she replied, and the frost in her tone made the room feel colder. Preston's gaze slid to Travis and held there with interest that felt invasive. "And you must be the new resident," he said. Travis didn't move. "Maybe," he answered. Preston's smile widened a fraction, and then he did it. Casual, effortless, like dropping a needle into skin. "Travis," he said. Then softer, more familiar than it had any right to be. "Kenner." Travis felt the hairs at the back of his neck rise. He hadn't offered his full name. Morgan's eyes snapped to Travis, then back to Preston. Preston glanced down at Riven, with the appreciation of someone evaluating an asset. "Beautiful Malinois," he said. "Working dog. The kind that makes things complicated." Riven did not bark. He shifted half a step closer to Travis. Body squared, eyes fixed on Preston's hands. Posture alert and steady. Travis kept his calm expression in place by force. Inside, anger flared clean and hot. "What do you want?" Morgan asked, voice clipped. Preston lifted his hands slightly, palms out, harmless theater. "Only to make sure everyone stays safe," he said. "This town doesn't need old rumors stirred up. People get hurt when they chase stories." Travis's voice came out low. "Stories don't leave shipping notes," he said. Preston's smile didn't change, but his pupils tightened slightly, like a man pleased to have found a lever. "You'd be surprised what paperwork can do," he said. Morgan stepped forward, cutting the air between them. "This is a restricted staff area," she said. "Noah?" Noah looked uncomfortable, like a man caught between civic politeness and self-preservation. "He has donor access," Noah admitted quietly, eyes apologetic. Preston's smile turned almost sympathetic. "See," he said, "we all have our roles." Then he leaned slightly, voice softening to something that could have passed for concern if you didn't hear the blade underneath. "Ranger Ashford, I represent a conservation group interested in protecting land near the lake. I'd hate for misunderstandings to create unnecessary conflict." Morgan's jaw worked. "This isn't a sales meeting." "Everything is a meeting," Preston replied pleasantly, and his eyes returned to Travis like a hook. "Especially when someone starts asking about keepers." Travis held his gaze, feeling the old instinct to strike first rise and then be crushed under discipline. Riven stayed steady at his side, an anchor with a heartbeat. Noah quietly closed the folder halfway, as if hiding it might make the room safer. Morgan's voice dropped. "You're done here," she said. Preston sighed like she was being unreasonable. "If you insist," he said, and took one step back. He didn't leave immediately. He let his eyes linger on Travis in a way that felt like a promise. "Be careful," he added, still polite, still smiling. Some doors close for a reason. Then he turned and walked out, footsteps calm on linoleum, as if he owned the hallway. For a moment, no one spoke. The archive room seemed to exhale. Travis looked at Morgan. "How did he know my name?" he asked. Morgan's face was hard, but there was something else there too. Disgust, maybe, or regret. "Because someone talks," she said. "Or because someone watches." Noah swallowed. "He donates," he offered weakly, as if money were an excuse. Morgan shot him a look that ended the sentence. Travis's mind shifted to a new angle. Preston wasn't just a nuisance. He was a signal that the phrase, "keeper of the ice lake," wasn't folklore. It was a pressure point. Morgan closed the folder fully. "We're not discussing this out here," she said. "Not in the open stacks. Not in front of cameras." Travis's eyes narrowed. "Cameras?" Noah hesitated. "Hallway cam," he said. "Just standard." Morgan was already moving, boots quiet, posture purposeful. She led them out through the staff corridor, toward a small monitor desk. The hallway was empty, sunlit through high windows, ordinary in the way ordinary places were when something ugly hid inside them. Morgan tapped keys, pulled up the time bar, and scrubbed back to earlier that morning. The footage played smooth, Noah unlocking the staff door, Morgan entering the hall quiet. Then the video stuttered for a blink. Not static, not blur, a clean freeze, and the timestamp jumped forward, exactly 1 minute. Morgan's face went still. "That's not a glitch," she said, voice low. Noah's hands trembled slightly as he leaned closer. "That wasn't there last week," he whispered. Travis stared at the missing minute, as if it were a wound cut into time. 1 minute gone, sliced out so neatly it felt surgical. Morgan turned her head slowly toward Travis, eyes cold and certain. "Someone edited our records," she said, "which means someone has access." Riven's ears angled down the hallway, body steady as if he could hear the shape of danger moving behind walls. Travis felt the bright northern day turn sharp in his chest. The Keeper wasn't just a person. The Keeper was a system. And that system had just proven it could erase moments as easily as it erased answers. The morning after the clearing, she drove. The morning after the clearing, she drove the hard case south to a regional federal facility that looked intentionally forgettable. Flat walls, clean doors, the kind of place designed to make drama feel childish. Travis Kenner wasn't invited inside. He waited in the parking lot with his shoulders squared and his calm, composed expression locked onto his clean-shaven, angular face like a mask he'd worn for years. His cold, blue-gray eyes tracked every car that rolled past, every reflection in every window. He stood in his complete standard-issue green digital camouflage uniform, matching blouse and trousers fully buttoned, properly fitted. Plain black belt, plain black combat boots, no helmet, no hat, no eyewear, no vest, no armor, no gloves, no headset, no backpack, no weapon, no patches, nothing that could be confiscated, misread, or used to write a headline. Riven stayed close at heel, full-grown Belgian Malinois with a lean, muscular build, deep fawn to mahogany coat, and a distinct black facial mask, upright ears, intense dark amber eyes, wearing a tan tactical K9 vest and a simple working dog collar. The dog's posture was alert and steady, obedient and mission-ready, facing the same direction as Travis, as if their attention shared a spine. Travis watched Rains through the glass doors as she signed forms and handed over sealed bags with the same controlled care she'd used in the woods. He could almost feel the weight of the evidence leaving the town's orbit, and with it the false comfort of believing he could control what happened next. A man like him was trained to solve problems with action. This problem demanded something harder, restraint that still held teeth. When Rains finally returned, she didn't look triumphant. She looked focused. "It's logged," she said simply. "And it's protected from local hands." Travis heard what she didn't say. Protected from local pressure. Morgan Ashford met them back at the ranger station, jaw tight, eyes gray-green sharp under the fluorescent light. She had tried, that same afternoon, to pull the town's project file through official channels, requests, old permits, archived correspondence. The answer came back polite and empty, pages missing, signatures cropped off in the digitized version. A scanned closure document that looked complete until you noticed the final line was a ghost of a line, like someone had dragged a digital eraser across the part that mattered most. Morgan's voice stayed controlled, but Travis could hear the anger underneath. "They don't even bother hiding that it's altered," she said. "They just count on people accepting. That's how it is." Travis swallowed a bitter laugh he didn't let out. He'd spent years in a world where "that's how it is" was the first lie you learned to survive. They went hunting for the person who could explain how a record becomes a rumor. Morgan had a name already: Grant Hollis, the town's contract tech for cameras, network storage, and whatever old systems had been patched together to look modern. Grant didn't work out of an office that screamed power. He worked out of a cramped shop behind an appliance repair storefront. The kind of place that smelled like solder and stale coffee, and people who stayed up too late, fixing problems that weren't theirs. Grant Hollis was late 30s, thin in a tired way, with shoulders that slumped as if the cold had been sitting on them for years. His face was narrow, cheekbones pronounced, jaw shadowed by uneven stubble that looked less like style and more like surrender. Short hair, brown going lighter at the temples, hands marked by small cuts and old burns from careless wiring. He wore a faded work jacket in navy gray with oil smudges at the cuffs, a hoodie underneath, and boots that had seen too many winters to pretend they were new. He greeted Morgan with forced friendliness that cracked when he saw Travis's uniform and Riven's steady professional stillness. His eyes flicked to the dog and away too fast, like he'd learned that looking too long invited questions. "Ranger," he said, voice tight. "What's this about?" Morgan didn't soften. "Records," she replied. "Cameras, access logs, the kind of thing you claim not to care about until someone edits it." Grant's mouth twitched. "Systems glitch," he said immediately. "NVRs freeze, timestamps drift. It's rural infrastructure." Travis stood silent, letting Grant talk himself into a corner. The man's words came quick and practiced, but his body betrayed him. The way he kept rubbing his thumb against the edge of his key ring. The way he angled his torso slightly toward the back door like he wanted an exit. Morgan pushed a printout across the counter. Nothing dramatic, just a simple screen grab that proved the file wasn't whole. "That's not a glitch," she said. Grant stared, swallowed, and tried to smile. "You know how compression works," he murmured. "Packets drop." Travis finally spoke, low and even. "Packets don't remove signatures," he said. Grant flinched as if the sentence had snapped a wire. His gaze slid to Morgan, then to Riven, then to the dusty window. "I'm not the only one with access," he said quietly. "There are permissions." Morgan leaned in. "Whose?" Grant's eyes tightened. "Donor accounts," he whispered, almost embarrassed by the phrase. "The board. People who help the town get keys." Morgan's face hardened. Travis felt the familiar ache of a system that sold its locks to whoever smiled politely enough. Grant added softer, "You think I want this? I just keep the lights on." His voice cracked at the last words, like he'd said them too many times to convince himself. So, Travis looked at him and saw something that wasn't villainy. Fear with a paycheck. "If you know they're inside the records," Travis said, "then you know what happens when someone doesn't comply." Grant didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was the confession. They returned to Travis's cabin before dark. Not because they expected an attack, but because they'd learned the threat here wasn't loud. It was administrative. It was reputational. It was the kind of harm that arrived wrapped in forms. The sky over the lake was still bright, the snow reflecting sunlight so clean it felt insulting. Travis parked, scanned the road for tire tracks, and found new ones, faint but fresh enough to make his stomach turn. Riven stepped out and immediately angled toward the garage, nose lifting, then dropping, posture tightening into focused work. The dog's dark amber eyes didn't look playful. They looked serious, the way a partner looks when he has spotted something that could change the day. Travis followed without rushing, boots quiet on packed snow. Inside the garage, the air smelled wrong. Not gasoline, not wood, but a sharp chemical tang, like solvent used to clean metal or strip residue. Travis's pulse changed. Riven moved to a corner near the workbench and froze, ears forward, body still. He didn't paw. He didn't whine. He simply stared at a small plastic tote that Travis swore he'd left empty. Morgan stepped in behind him, her face tightening at the smell. "That wasn't here," she said, more statement than question. Travis didn't touch the tote. His instincts screamed to grab it, to see what someone had planted, to remove the threat before it became a story. Another instinct, harder one, held him still. "Camille," he said into his phone, voice controlled. "I need you on speaker. Now." Rains answered quickly, the kind of quick that meant she'd already assumed trouble would come. Travis kept his eyes on the tote, hands visible, refusing to give anyone a picture of him handling contraband. "Something's been placed in my garage," he said. "Strong solvent odor. We're not touching it." Rains's voice sharpened. "Back away. Photograph. Document who is present. Morgan, secure the perimeter." Morgan moved instantly, stepping back outside to check for footprints and vehicles. Riven stayed planted like a statue, his body a barrier between Travis and the tote, as if the dog understood this wasn't about attacking. This was about not giving the enemy a single clean frame of chaos. Travis snapped photos with his phone, wide and close, then waited until Rains told him exactly how to open the tote, safely, on camera, with gloves, with distance, with the kind of procedural caution that turned a trap into evidence. Inside was a small sealed bottle and a rag that reeked of chemical cleaner, and beneath it, a slim pouch with a label that looked intentionally ambiguous. Enough to spark suspicion. Not enough to prove anything without context. Travis's throat tightened with anger. "They're trying to make me the story," he said, voice low. Rains didn't comfort him. She didn't need to. "Yes," she replied. "And you just made it harder for them." After Morgan finished checking the snow line, she returned with her face pale, under her sun-tanned skin. "There's only one set of new boot prints," she said quietly. "And they don't come from the road. They come from the tree line." Travis felt cold spread behind his ribs. Someone had walked in from the woods like they belonged there. Riven suddenly lifted his head, ears sharply upright, and stared at the closed garage door, not at the handle, but at the thin gap at the bottom, where air moved. He inhaled slowly, then took one step back toward Travis, pressing his shoulder against Travis's thigh in a grounding, deliberate contact. Not fear, not affection. A signal. You are being tested, and you are not alone. Travis looked down at the dog's black masked face and felt something shift that he couldn't explain with training alone. It wasn't superstition. It was the strange, quiet faith that sometimes the right creature shows up in the right moment to keep you from becoming your worst reflex. Travis's hand hovered over Riven's vest, then rested there briefly, firm and steady. "Good," Travis murmured. Not praise. Gratitude. The dog held still, eyes intense, as if accepting the responsibility of keeping a human from stepping off the cliff of anger. The moment passed, but it left Travis with a colder clarity. Whoever was behind this knew exactly how to provoke him, and they were counting on him to react like the man he used to be, not the man he was trying to become. Agent Rains moved fast after that. She assigned a retrieval team to take the planted items into custody and ordered an official incident report that documented the attempted setup. Meanwhile, she dug into the ledger recovered from the compartment, treating it like a map written in code. The symbols weren't simple town corruption. They were structured. Repeating sequences, batch indicators, date formats that matched larger systems. "This isn't petty," she told Travis later over a secure call. "This is laundering, not money alone. Materials, seized goods, diverted goods, something that was never supposed to exist on paper in the first place." Travis sat at his kitchen table, the radio turned off, the cabin quiet except for the soft sound of Riven's breathing. Outside, the lake reflected the late sun like polished metal. Travis stared at his hands and felt the old sense of being pulled toward a mission he hadn't volunteered for. "Why leave it in the woods?" he asked. Rains's answer was immediate. "Because it's not spending money," she said. "It's leverage, a silent vault. You don't cash it. You keep it. And you make everyone else behave." Morgan added her own piece when she stopped by, her ranger jacket dusted with snow, her expression hard. "Preston's already pushing," she said. "Letters, threats, talk of lawsuits if we damage protected land. And I heard a rumor he's filing a complaint about your dog." Travis felt heat rise in his chest. "For what?" Morgan's mouth tightened. "For being dangerous. For being trained. For existing next to you." Travis looked at Riven. The Malinois stared back, alert and steady, as if he understood the word dangerous was just a costume people put on what they feared. Travis's voice came out low. "He wants to separate us," he said. Morgan nodded once. "Because your dog doesn't panic," she replied, "and panic is how they win." Near the end of the week, Rains called again, voice tighter than before. "We opened the sealed tube under lab protocol," she said. "There's a document inside, and a shipping code." Travis stood up so fast his chair scraped. "What code?" Rains read it slowly, like she wanted each character to land clean. A string that looked like logistics formatting, unit-like, manifest-like, the kind of thing that lived on labels and pallets and flight lines. Travis felt the room tilt with memory he didn't invite. He had seen that format before, on cases that arrived at night, on paperwork that was never supposed to be copied, on shipments that people told him not to ask about because asking was how you became a problem. His mouth went dry. "That's military," he whispered. Rains didn't confirm it yet. She didn't need to. "You recognize it," she said. Travis stared at the window where bright snow made the world look pure. He wanted to deny it, to bury it, to be the quiet man with a dog and a routine again, but the code had already reached through time and touched him. "Yes," he said finally, voice rough. "I've seen it." The silence on the line wasn't judgment. It was gravity. And Travis understood with a cold certainty that the statue's vault hadn't just been built to hide gold. It had been built to pull the right person back into a story they thought they'd escaped. Morgan Ashford didn't call it in from her office. She didn't use the open line. She didn't stand in front of the ranger station window with a phone pressed to her ear where anyone could see her mouth moving. She waited until dusk when the lake went steel gray and the main street thinned into silence. Then she drove her government truck 2 blocks past the library and parked behind the snowplow shed where the cameras didn't reach. The cold sat heavy in the air, and the sky had that northern clarity that made even streetlights look honest. Morgan leaned back in her seat, exhaled once, and looked at Travis Kenner with a hard, practical expression. Up close, she looked like the kind of woman the landscape had shaped on purpose. Tall, broad-shouldered, weather-tanned skin, dark hair pulled into a tight, low knot, eyes gray-green and sharp as cut glass. She wasn't unkind. She was simply allergic to nonsense. "If someone can slice a minute out of our hallway footage," she said, "then this isn't a curiosity. This is a controlled space." Travis sat upright, calm on the outside, tight on the inside, his clean-shaven, angular face unreadable. He was still in his standard-issue green digital camouflage uniform, fully buttoned, plain black belt, plain black boots, no extra gear, disciplined like a man who refused to give anyone new details to weaponize. Riven lay on the backseat floorboard, tan tactical vest rising and falling with steady breaths, dark amber eyes open, listening more than sleeping. Morgan continued, voice low, "We do this clean. Chain of custody, documentation, proper authority." Travis gave a small nod. He didn't like authority. He liked procedure when it protected truth instead of burying it. Morgan tapped her phone and placed one call through a secure contact list she didn't mention out loud. When the voice answered, Morgan's posture shifted. Subtly respectful, like she was speaking to someone who didn't accept excuses. "Camille," Morgan said, "I need you out here, tomorrow, early." A pause, then the voice responded with a calm that sounded like it had been trained. "What did you find?" Morgan glanced at Travis once, then away. "Something someone doesn't want found," she replied, "and they're already inside our records." Another pause, sharper this time. "Send coordinates," the voice said. Morgan did, then ended the call. She looked at Travis. "Special Agent Camille Rains," she said. "USFS Office of Law Enforcement and Investigations. She doesn't play small-town politics. That's why I'm calling her." Travis felt something close to relief and hated himself for it. Relief meant he'd been carrying this alone too long. Morning came bright and biting, snow glittering like ground-up glass. Agent Rains arrived in a plain, dark SUV that didn't advertise anything except competence. She stepped out with the kind of controlled economy Travis recognized immediately. No wasted motion, no dramatic scanning, just the quiet alertness of someone who expected trouble and planned for it. Camille Rains was in her early 40s, lean and compact, posture straight without stiffness. Her face was sharp but not harsh. Dark eyes that didn't blink often. A mouth set in a neutral line that could become a verdict when needed. Her hair was dark brown, pulled into a low bun so tight it looked like it was holding her focus in place. She wore a charcoal softshell jacket over a dark turtleneck, dark tactical pants, and black boots meant for real terrain. A simple ID lanyard lay against her chest, and a slim, hard folder was tucked under one arm like a shield. She shook Morgan's hand, then looked at Travis. "Mr. Kenner," she said. Not a question. Travis held her gaze. "Agent," he replied. Riven stood beside Travis, full-grown Belgian Malinois, lean, muscular build, deep fawn to mahogany coat, with a black facial mask that made him look perpetually serious. The dog's ears were upright, eyes intense, posture alert and steady, facing the same direction as Travis. Rains's gaze dropped to the dog for a fraction of a second. "Good discipline," she said quietly, and there was respect in it, not sentiment. "We'll keep it that way." They moved to the forest in two vehicles, spacing themselves like people who understood that a tale could be more dangerous than a confrontation. The road toward the ridge was hard-packed snow with thin ice in the shaded dips. Sunlight filtered through the trees in sharp beams, and the air smelled clean enough to make lies seem impossible. Travis drove with both hands on the wheel, jaw tight. Morgan followed, radio silent. Agent Rains rode with Morgan, checking maps, cross-referencing coordinates, making notes with a pen that moved like it trusted her. Travis felt the old operational mindset settle over him. Not excitement, not fear, but focus. The kind that came when a situation stopped being theoretical. When the clearing opened, the statue stood in its white island like an artifact from a different century. Rains didn't react with awe. She reacted with procedure. She walked the perimeter first, eyes scanning the snow, noting disturbances, the angle of shadows, the places where someone might stand to watch without being seen. "No one crosses in until I mark it," she said, voice calm and absolute. Morgan obeyed instantly. Travis did too, though a part of him bristled at being told anything. Riven stayed at heel, steady as a vow. Rains placed small flags around the clearing, then crouched near the edge where the snow had been compressed. She traced the shallow line with 2 fingers without touching the deepest part, then looked up. "Recent tire tracks," she said. "Not yours." Morgan's mouth tightened. Travis's stomach sank. Rains continued, moving like she was reading a language written in pressure and absence. "Stake marks," she added, pointing to a thin wooden peg, half buried near the trees. "And monofilament." She lifted a nearly invisible line with gloved fingers, holding it up so sunlight caught it. They measured. They were preparing. Travis's hands curled once, then relaxed. Someone had been planning to access the statue. Maybe to extract something, maybe to replace something, maybe to erase what he'd seen. Rains stood and photographed everything, wide shots, close-ups, the seam in the statue's raised hand, the exposed gold, the carved warning, without repeating it aloud. "You don't narrate evidence," she said when Morgan began to speak. "You let it talk later." Morgan nodded, chastened. Travis watched Rains and felt something bitter in his chest. This was what competence looked like when it wasn't chained to fear. Riven's behavior changed. The Malinois lowered his head and began moving along the statue's shadowed rear, nose working in slow, methodical passes. He didn't dig. He didn't whine. He tracked, purposeful and quiet, like a dog following a promise. Travis didn't give a command. Riven didn't need one. Agent Rains noticed immediately. "He's alerting," she said, not surprised, simply adjusting the plan. She watched the dog's line and followed at a measured distance. Riven stopped at a patch of snow behind the statue's base and huffed once, controlled, but then he looked back at Travis briefly. Permission, confirmation, before returning his focus to the ground. Travis crouched and saw what the dog smelled, a faint waxy note under the clean air, like treated canvas and old oil. Agent Rains raised a gloved hand. "I handle it," she said. Travis stayed back, jaw tight. The SEAL in him wanted to act. The man trying to be better forced himself to let procedure protect the truth. Rains brushed away snow with a small plastic tool and exposed the edge of a metal plate. A circular hatch, old steel, its bolts rusted, half swallowed by time. "That's not a natural feature," she said. Morgan's eyes widened. "A service access?" she guessed. "Or a vault door disguised as one," Rains replied, voice flat. She photographed, documented, then began loosening the bolts with controlled care. The hatch gave with a slow metallic sigh that sounded like the forest exhaling. Beneath was a shallow technical compartment, not a deep bunker, but enough to hide what someone wanted hidden. The air that rose from it smelled like waxed cloth and old machinery, preservation. Inside sat a tin box wrapped in waxed canvas, a small ledger bound in dark cover, and a sealed cylindrical tube with an official-looking band around it. Rains didn't touch anything bare-handed. She photographed each item in place, then spoke into a recorder with clipped clarity. Item, location, condition. Morgan watched like she was seeing a myth turn into paperwork. Travis felt his heartbeat steady. This wasn't superstition. This was evidence. As Agent Rains reached for the sealed tube, Riven abruptly stiffened, not in aggression, but in a sudden, razor-focused stillness. His ears angled toward the trees, and his gaze locked on a point above shoulder height, as if he could see a line of sight the humans couldn't. Travis followed the dog's stare and noticed something he hadn't noticed before. A faint, rhythmic clicking, almost like a distant insect. Agent Rains froze mid-motion, then slowly lifted her head. Without a word, she stepped back from the hatch and scanned upward. There, on the trunk of a pine near the clearing's edge, was a small device strapped tight with dark tape. So well camouflaged it looked like bark shadow until sunlight caught a sliver of plastic. A compact transmitter. Rains's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped. "Someone's running a short-range relay," she said. Morgan's face drained of color. Travis felt the cold truth settle into his gut. The forest hadn't been watching with magic. It had been watching with hardware. And the dog had heard it first. Riven didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply held steady, a living lie detector, refusing to be distracted. In that moment, Travis felt something almost sacred in the dog's discipline. Like the difference between chaos and justice could be as simple as a creature choosing restraint. Rains approached the transmitter cautiously, photographed it and cut it free with a small blade. "This could explain the radio bleed," she said, "or it could be used to trigger it." Travis's mouth went dry. He didn't say "I knew it." He didn't say "I told you." He just watched Rains bag the device as evidence and label it with the same careful respect she gave the sealed tube. Morgan exhaled shakily. "So, they're close," she whispered. Or they were. Rains looked at the tire tracks again. "They're close enough to plan," she said. "That's worse." They finished documentation and sealed the compartment back temporarily, with evidence tape and marked flags. Rains placed the tin box, the ledger, and the tube into separate evidence bags, then into a hard case. "No one touches this again until it's logged," she said. "Not even me." Morgan nodded. Travis didn't argue. He had seen too many truths die because someone wanted to be heroic instead of correct. As they moved toward the vehicles, a crunch of snow came from the far side of the clearing. Morgan's shoulders tightened. Travis's body shifted automatically, feet planting, weight balanced, breath controlled. Riven stepped slightly forward, blocking Travis without being commanded. Eyes fixed. From between the trees emerged Preston Vale, coat too clean, smile too polished for a place where your boots should be wet. He didn't look surprised to see them. That was the point. He carried a small device in his gloved hand, no bigger than a fist. He set it low on a rock facing the clearing. A camera, lens angled up just enough to capture faces and tension. "Ranger Ashford," Preston said, voice smooth as ice. "Agent Rains," he added, eyes flicking to the ID lanyard, like he'd already memorized it. "Mr. Kenner." Travis didn't move. Morgan's voice went sharp. "You're trespassing near an active federal scene." Preston lifted his hands in mock innocence. "I'm merely ensuring transparency," he said. "The public deserves to know what's being done with their land." Rains stepped forward, calm and cold. "Move away from the evidence," she said. Preston's smile remained, but his gaze darted to Riven. "And the dog?" he asked lightly, as if making conversation. "I've heard retired military dogs can be unpredictable." Travis felt heat flare in his chest. He understood the trap instantly. Provoke the dog, capture a moment of tension, label Travis dangerous, turn evidence into scandal. Preston didn't need a gun. He needed a narrative. Riven's discipline ruined it. The Malinois walked one step forward and sat directly between Travis and the camera, body tall and still, eyes locked on Preston's hands. He didn't snarl. He didn't bark. He made himself a barrier. Preston's smile faltered for the smallest fraction of a second. Annoyance leaking through polish. Rains didn't raise her voice. "Your device is interfering," she said. "Turn it off and leave, or you'll be detained." Preston chuckled softly. "Detained?" he repeated. tasting the word. For filming? Rains's eyes didn't soften. For obstruction, she said. Morgan stepped closer, radio in hand. Preston looked around at the trees, then back at them, smile returning. Be careful, he said, voice gentle and threatening at once. Some discoveries come with consequences. Then he turned and walked away, as if he'd accomplished exactly what he came for, reminding them he could appear whenever he wanted. They didn't chase him. Rains didn't want the story to become a foot race. She wanted it to become a case. At the vehicle, she locked the evidence case in her SUV and sealed it with a numbered tag. Morgan watched, jaw tight. Travis looked down at Riven. The Malinois stood alert and steady, focused and obedient, facing the same direction as Travis, toward the forest road where Preston had disappeared. Travis's calm expression stayed in place, but inside something shifted again. Yesterday it had felt like a strange discovery. Today it felt like a fight over who owned the truth. And the difference between those two things was the difference between staying quiet and being hunted. Agent Camille Rains did not open the sealed tube in a small-town office with a coffee ring on the desk. She opened it in a controlled room where the air smelled like disinfectant and patience, where cameras watched the hands as carefully as the eyes, where chain of custody was not a phrase people used to sound serious but a discipline that kept truth from being strangled by convenience. Travis Kenner sat behind a glass partition with his shoulders squared, his face calm and composed, the clean-shaven angles of his jaw set hard. His cold blue-gray eyes tracked every movement through the window, not because he distrusted Rains, but because his body didn't know how to stop scanning for betrayal. He wore his complete standard-issue green digital camouflage uniform, fully buttoned blouse and trousers, plain black belt, plain black combat boots, no extra gear, no accessories, no patch, nothing that would be turned into a story. Riven wasn't allowed inside the lab, but he waited in the hallway with Morgan Ashford, upright ears alert, dark amber eyes steady, tan tactical vest snug over his lean muscular frame. Black facial mask giving him that serious, focused look that made strangers assume he was dangerous when he was simply disciplined. Every so often the Malinois stood and repositioned himself so he faced the door directly, as if he could feel that something important was about to cross the threshold. Morgan stayed near him, arms crossed over her heavy dark green field jacket, jaw tight. She looked like she belonged in snow more than fluorescent light, tall, broad-shouldered, weather-tanned, dark hair tied low and tight, gray-green eyes watching the world as if it often disappointed her. Rains, on the other side of the glass, wore the same composed severity she always wore. Charcoal jacket, dark turtleneck, boots built for ground that fought back, hair pulled into a low bun that didn't permit distraction, and she placed the sealed tube on the table and spoke softly into the recorder. Her voice clipped, precise. Date, time, evidence, ID, condition of seal, witness names. A technician in the room with her, an older man with graying hair and a patient face that suggested he'd seen every form of desperation, stood slightly back and watched, hands folded, the way professionals watched other professionals. Rains cut the seal slowly, no flourish, no rush. She opened the tube and lit out its contents as if they were fragile, not because they might break, but because they might break people. First came a small brass key, dull with age but clean, the kind of key that had once belonged to something heavy. Then a thin cassette tape in a plastic case, label handwritten in block letters. Then a folded letter, edges softened, paper thick enough to survive decades wrapped in waxed cloth. Rains didn't read it immediately. She photographed it. Then she put on fresh gloves and unfolded it with the care of someone lifting a sleeping child. The handwriting was neat and disciplined, the kind that came from engineer and men who believed order could protect them. Travis felt his throat tighten before he could help it. He hated how ink could make his body react. He hated more that the writing looked like someone who had tried to be careful and still failed. Rains read silently for a moment, then looked up through the glass at Travis. Her eyes didn't soften, but her voice did something close to respect. "This is a confession," she said. Travis's chest tightened. "From who?" Rains glanced down at the signature. "A site engineer," she replied. "Name, Everett Latham." The name meant nothing to Travis, yet. Rains began reading portions aloud into the recorder, not theatrically, but enough that the words took on weight in the room. Everett described the statue project as a commemoration, pitched to the town as a symbol, a tourist draw, a civic monument. Then his tone shifted. The letter said the statue had been redesigned quietly after funding changes, its core replaced with something secured, something not to be logged in any public manifest. Everett wrote that he was ordered to sign off on shipments that didn't match the materials list, and when he questioned it, a man with a calm smile and government language told him to think of it as public safety. The statue was not built to inspire. It was built to contain. It was a vault disguised as stone. Travis's hands clenched once on his knees, then relaxed by force. He'd spent his life dealing with containers, crates, cases, compartments, secrets sealed inside metal. He knew the kind of men who used the word safety like a weapon. Rains turned to the next page. Everett states the gold was not donated or purchased, Mananchi said. It was seized property. Travis's breath caught. Rains's voice stayed steady. Federal seizure. A portion disappeared from a storage chain years ago. The statue project was the legal wrapper. The forest was the hiding place. Morgan's face went hard in the hallway. "So, this town's little monument," she muttered, voice low with disgust, "was a laundering pit." Travis felt cold spread behind his ribs. If the gold was seized, then somebody with access had diverted it. Somebody who could make paperwork bend. Somebody who could erase a minute of footage like it was dust. Rains slid the letter aside and opened the cassette case. "There's audio," she said. "We're digitizing under protocol." She didn't play it immediately. She followed procedure, scanning the tape, logging its condition, preparing a secure copy. Travis watched her hands and felt something strange. Gratitude. Not for the truth yet, for the fact that someone was finally handling it like it mattered. When the audio came through the speakers, it wasn't dramatic music or a ghostly whisper. It was the tired, steady voice of a man who had been trying to survive his own conscience. Everett Latham spoke into a recorder years ago, describing the night the core shipment arrived. He described men without company logos, vehicles that didn't belong on rural roads, a supervisor who introduced himself only by title, PSC, Public Safety Coordinator. Everett said the PSC spoke like a priest reading scripture, calm and certain, explaining that the gold was not the issue. The issue was what the gold could do. Buy silence, buy compliance, buy missing minutes. "This isn't theft," Everett's recorded voice said. "This is containment." Travis's jaw tightened until it hurt. Containment. He knew that word too well. He had been trained to contain chaos. He had also been trained sometimes to contain questions, and he had obeyed. Rains paused the playback and looked at Travis through the glass. "The shipping code in the tube matches federal seizure formatting," she said, "and it matches the code you recognized." Travis swallowed, feeling old sand in his throat. "I've seen that label style," he admitted, "on shipments that showed up at odd hours. Things we were told not to ask about. Logistics people handled it." He didn't say more, because saying more would mean stepping into a memory he kept locked for a reason. He could feel the past pressing against the present like a door that wanted to open. Rains didn't push. She simply nodded once, a professional acknowledgement. "The letter says PSC was praised publicly years later," she said. A respected benefactor, a community protector. Morgan's eyes narrowed. "There's a name behind that title," she said. "There always is." Travis's mind pictured Preston Vale's smooth smile, his polished coat, his donor access. But the letter made it clear. Preston was not the architect. He was the messenger, the cleaner, the man sent to keep hands off the vault. The architect was someone the town admired, someone who could stand in front of cameras and speak about safety and community and be believed. Travis felt anger flare, then something colder, shame, because he recognized the technique. He had lived inside systems where the worst men wore the best language. He left the lab with Raines's summary echoing in his head, the kind of echo that didn't fade with distance. Outside, the sun was bright on the snow, and the world looked almost holy in its whiteness. Travis hated how beautiful it all was. He met Morgan and Riven at the vehicle. The Malinois rose immediately, eyes intense, posture alert and steady, facing the same direction as Travis, as if his loyalty had a compass built in. Travis rested a hand briefly on the dog's vest, firm and grounding. "You did good," he murmured. Not praise, acknowledgement. Morgan watched him, her hard expression softening by a fraction. "We have the truth," she said. "Now, we need to keep it alive." That afternoon, the pressure escalated, exactly the way Raines predicted. Preston Vale did not storm into the ranger station with a gun. He sent letters, complaints, phone calls that sounded polite but tasted like threats. A formal notice arrived for Travis. A complaint filed with the county, alleging that a trained attack dog had been used to intimidate a civilian and interfere with a lawful conservation inquiry. Travis read the paper once and felt his hand shake. Not from fear, but from the insult of it. Riven sat beside him, still as stone. Black mask pointed forward, ears upright, eyes dark amber and patient. Morgan paced once, boots heavy on the floor. "This is his play," she said. "He can't beat evidence, so he attacks credibility." Travis exhaled slowly, forcing himself not to rip the page. "He wants my dog," Travis said. The words landed in the room like a vow. Morgan nodded once. "He wants your leverage," she replied. "He wants you alone." Agent Raines moved faster than Preston's paperwork. She already had body cam footage from the clearing. Photographs of Preston placing his camera. Timestamps of his presence near a federal scene. Documentation of the planted items in Travis's garage. And now the recorded confession inside the gold core. She didn't just file a response. She built a wall. She sent an official notification to county authorities. Any attempt to seize or separate the working dog from the primary witness could be interpreted as interference with an ongoing federal investigation. The language was dry. The effect was sharp. Preston's narrative hit a barrier it couldn't charm. Still, the man tried. He arrived at a public meeting in town wearing his clean coat and his practiced smile, speaking about public safety and untrained individuals playing vigilante. He didn't say Travis's name on the microphone. He didn't have to. People looked anyway. Travis stood at the back of the room, upright, calm, composed, the SEAL uniform making him look like an accusation against small-town comfort. Riven stood at his side, tan vest snug, body steady, alert, obedient, facing the same direction as Travis. No growl, no bark, no threat, just presence. The room buzzed with that uneasy human instinct to judge what they didn't understand. Preston talked like a man offering peace. Travis listened like a man hearing a trap. When Preston finished, Morgan stepped forward, her voice clear and hard. "This isn't rumor," she said. "This is documented evidence." As Morgan spoke, Riven did something. As Morgan spoke, Riven did something Travis had almost never seen him do in public. The Malinois lifted his head and looked past the crowd, past Preston, toward the back wall where a framed photograph of the town founders hung. Riven's ears angled and his eyes fixed on one face in the photo, an older man in a suit, smiling with the kind of confidence that came from being admired. Riven held that stare so long, it pulled Travis's gaze with it. Travis didn't know why his chest tightened until he noticed the plaque beneath the frame. Public Safety Coordinator, Founding Advisory. The initials PSC weren't just a title in a letter. They were a local honor, a legacy. Travis felt the room tilt, not into supernatural fear, but into a strange, sobering realization. The truth wasn't hidden in the woods because it was far away. It was hidden in plain sight because people had been taught to bow to it. Riven's unwavering stare felt like a silent refusal to bow. Travis swallowed hard, and for a moment in that crowded room, he felt something like faith rise in him, the belief that truth could still stand up, even when worship had been mistaken for respect. After the meeting, Morgan didn't let the moment fade into hallway gossip. She leaned close to Travis outside under the bright snowlight and spoke with the kind of practical courage that didn't ask permission. "We can't let this die in file cabinets," she said. "They'll edit. They'll delay. They'll bury it under procedure." Travis's jaw clenched. "So, what do we do?" Morgan's eyes held his. "We put it where they can't erase it," she said. "The lake, public daylight, witnesses, copies in multiple hands." Travis looked down at Riven. The Malinois stood steady, focused, obedient, mission-ready, facing the same direction as Travis. Not toward violence, toward forward. Travis breathed in the cold air and felt the weight of the old code in his mind. Orders, silence, closed files. He had lived too long under the belief that survival meant compliance. Now he was learning a new belief. Survival might also mean testimony. He nodded once. "Clean," he said. "No chaos. Just truth." Morgan nodded. "Just truth," she echoed. And in the bright north, with snow reflecting light like a relentless witness, Travis understood the chapter of his life he'd tried to avoid was now demanding to be lived correctly. They didn't call it a press conference. Morgan Ashford refused the word the way she refused cheap heroism. "We're not here to perform," she said. "We're here to make erasing impossible." The lake lay just beyond town like a sheet of hammered steel, its frozen surface reflecting the late winter sun so brightly it made people squint and look away. That mattered. Light had a way of forcing honesty, or at least forcing faces to be seen. Travis Kenner stood at the shoreline in his complete standard-issue green digital camouflage uniform, matching blouse and trousers, properly fitted and fully buttoned. Plain black belt, plain black combat boots, no helmet, no hat, no eyewear, no vest, no armor, no gloves, no headset, no backpack, no weapon, no patches, nothing extra. He looked like discipline given a human shape. Angular, rugged face, sharp jawline, clean-shaven, cold blue-gray eyes that scanned without drama. Modern, neat, short undercut with tight, faded sides and a short, textured top that didn't move even in wind. He stood upright with a calm, composed, authoritative expression, but inside his chest something kept trying to shake loose. Old anger, old guilt, the memory of orders that had been framed as safety. Beside him stood Riven, full-grown Belgian Malinois, 4 to 5 years old, lean, muscular build, deep fawn to mahogany coat, with a distinct black facial mask, upright ears, intense, dark amber eyes. The dog wore a tan tactical K9 vest and a simple working dog collar, alert and steady, focused and obedient, mission-ready, facing the same direction as Travis, as if their bodies had learned the same truth. Riven didn't wag for the crowd. He didn't soften for attention. He simply watched, quiet, loyal, precise, as if this was another perimeter to hold. Agent Camille Rains arrived early and set the structure before anyone could turn it into gossip. She moved, like procedure-wearing boots. Charcoal jacket, dark turtleneck, dark tactical pants, hair in a tight low bun, face sharp and controlled, eyes that didn't waste time. She didn't bring a stage. She brought a folding table, a hard case, and a small battery-powered display screen. She brought copies, not speeches. Next to her stood a woman Travis hadn't met before, introduced only as a state attorney with a calm spine. Abigail Sutter looked like someone built for courtrooms and difficult truths. Late 30s, slender but not fragile. Pale skin warmed by wind. Auburn hair tucked into a low ponytail. A narrow face with firm cheekbones and eyes the color of dark tea that didn't blink when people tried to intimidate her. Her coat was practical, dark wool over a simple suit, boots sensible enough for ice. She didn't smile easily. She didn't need to. She carried a leather folder like a weapon that didn't leave bruises. Standing off to the side with a camera bag slung across his chest was Jonah Larkins, an investigative reporter from a regional outlet, mid-40s with a weathered face and a salt and pepper beard, trimmed short, eyes sharp under a knit cap pulled low. He looked like someone who'd spent years learning which smiles were rehearsed and which silences were bought. He didn't chase anyone for quotes. He just positioned himself where he could see everything. That, Travis realized, was what made him dangerous to liars. Morgan had insisted the evidence chain be visible without being touched. The sequence was laid out like a story that could not be edited. Photographs of the statue in its clearing, close-ups of the carved warning on the exposed core, images of tire tracks and measuring stakes, the metal hatch, the items inside the compartment. Next, scanned pages from the ledger with symbols highlighted and translated into patterns of transactions, dates, and routes. Then the lab-logged confession letter and the digitized audio transcript from Everett Latham, the site engineer whose voice, tired, steady, ashamed, had described containment disguised as commemoration. Finally, printed documentation of the tampered hallway footage with the exact missing minute, and the tech access trail that traced how a donor permission could bypass normal oversight. Rains didn't shout conclusions. She narrated the chain in short factual sentences, and Abigail Sutter explained what those facts meant in legal terms. Not rumor, not folklore, but obstruction, diversion, and the laundering of seized property. Jonah Larkins filmed steadily, panning from documents to faces to the lake's bright surface, like he was capturing not just proof, but the atmosphere of accountability. Before this gathering, Rains had already sent the full packet, digitally signed and time-stamped, to federal counterparts, the state attorney's office, and a secure archive held by the reporter's newsroom. Multiple copies in multiple hands. That was the point. People arrived in small groups at first. Bundled locals, a couple of deputies who looked uneasy, a town clerk who kept glancing over her shoulder. Some came because they were curious, some because Morgan's reputation made them worry that ignoring it would be worse. Some because Preston Vale's reputation had taught them that being seen at the right time mattered. Preston arrived late, as if to suggest he had been busy doing more important things. He wore a dark overcoat cut too clean for winter work, gloves thin and stylish, shoes that looked like they'd never met slush. His hair was combed back neatly, his smile smooth as lake ice, his pale gray eyes measuring angles and audience. He approached with the same polite confidence he always carried, as if he belonged in every conversation. "Agent Rains," he said, voice warm enough to sound reasonable. "Ranger Ashford, Mr. Kenner." Travis didn't move. Riven shifted half a step closer to Travis, squared and silent, eyes fixed on Preston's hands. Preston noticed and masked it with charm. "Beautiful dog," he said lightly. "It's unfortunate that certain animals are misunderstood." Rains did not give him a stage. She held up one gloved hand, palm out, the gesture simple and absolute. "Mr. Vale, you are not here to address the crowd," she said. "If you interfere with an ongoing investigation, you will be removed." Preston's smile tightened, annoyed by the lack of room to perform. He turned slightly toward the townspeople anyway, as if he could win with proximity. Abigail Sutter stepped forward, voice calm and clear. "This is not a debate," she said. "This is a record." Jonah's camera pivoted toward Preston and held. Preston's eyes flicked to the lens and back, the smallest hint of discomfort slipping through. Cameras were supposed to be his tool. Today, they were someone else's witness. Grant Hollis arrived next, and Travis recognized him instantly by his posture before his face. Shoulders caved inward, head slightly down, hands fidgeting near his key ring like a man trying to shrink. Grant looked even more exhausted in daylight. Stubble uneven on his jaw. Work jacket smudged. Boots scuffed. He hovered at the edge like he wanted to leave without being seen. But Rains's gaze found him. She didn't call him out with cruelty. She called him out with fact. "Mr. Hollis," she said, "your system access logs are part of this record." Grant's face went pale. A murmur ran through the crowd. Morgan's jaw clenched, not with satisfaction, but with something like sorrow. Travis watched Grant and understood something ugly. Not everyone involved had been powerful. Some had been afraid. Still, fear didn't erase harm. It only explained it. Preston lifted a hand as if to protect Grant, the gesture patronizing. "This is what happens when untrained people meddle," he said smoothly. "They intimidate a contractor into saying whatever the authorities want." Travis felt his fists tighten, heat flaring under his ribs. The old reflex whispered, "End the threat. Remove the mouth. Silence the manipulator." It was a hymn his body remembered, but he looked down at Riven, lean muscle held in disciplined stillness, black mask pointed forward, dark amber eyes steady. The dog did not beg for permission to bite. He did not vibrate with aggression. He waited. That was the difference. Riven's restraint wasn't weakness. It was loyalty expressed as control. Travis breathed in the cold air and let it rinse the fire out of his throat. He stepped forward one pace, not to confront Preston physically, but to stand where his voice would carry. "I'm not here to be a hero," Travis said. His tone was even, calm, composed, authoritative, the kind of voice that didn't ask for attention but took it anyway. "I'm here because I found something that should have been found a long time ago." He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He pointed to the evidence sequence. "This is the chain," he continued. "A monument that wasn't a monument. A core that wasn't art. Records that were altered. A minute removed from footage because someone thought the truth could be edited." The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Travis held steady. "What's shocking isn't that gold existed," he said. "It's that it taught people to look away." Preston's smile hardened. "Speculation," he murmured. Abigail's voice cut through, crisp. "Documented," she corrected. Travis turned slightly so he could see the faces in front of him. People with winter-flushed cheeks, eyes narrowed against brightness, mouths tight with the instinct to protect the town's comfort. He understood them more than he wanted to. He had spent years protecting a different kind of comfort. National myths, operational secrecy, the lie that obedience always equals safety. "I know what it feels like to be told to stand down," he said quietly. But that sentence landed heavier than the rest, because it was personal. "I know what it feels like. To be told silence is the responsible choice." He paused, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was listening. Riven stood perfectly still, facing the same direction as Travis, like a vow made of fur. "This time," Travis said, "I'm choosing something else. I'm choosing a record that can't be erased by missing minutes." As Travis finished, a gust of wind swept across the lake, lifting snow crystals into the air like a sudden veil of glittering dust. For a moment the sunlight scattered, and the whole shoreline looked washed in white fire. In that brief shimmer, Riven's ears snapped sharply toward the tree line behind the crowd. Not alarm. Focus. The Malinois took 2 slow steps forward and stopped. Body squared, eyes locked on a single figure half hidden among parked cars. Travis followed the dog's stare and saw a man he hadn't noticed before. Older, heavy coat, hat pulled low, face turned away as if he'd been watching without wanting to be seen. The man didn't approach, he didn't speak, but when his gaze flicked up, Travis caught the flash in his eyes. Recognition, not of Travis's face, but of the discipline in Travis's posture and the dog at his side. The man's hand rose briefly to his chest, not a wave, not a greeting, more like a reflexive touch to something under his coat, as if checking an ID or a lanyard. Then he turned and walked away into the brightness, swallowed by moving people and light. Travis's chest tightened. He couldn't prove anything. He couldn't chase without turning the day into chaos. But the moment left a bruise of meaning. The truth wasn't just public now. It had drawn out hidden witnesses, and Riven had seen it first. The gust passed. The lake returned to stillness. The crowd murmured again, but the tone had changed. Not certainty, questions, doubt aimed in a new direction. Preston attempted to reclaim control with a sigh that sounded like disappointment. "You're going to scare people," he said, voice soft, paternal. "You're going to harm the town." Morgan stepped forward, eyes gray-green hard as stone. "The town was harmed when the truth was buried," she replied. "We're just admitting it now." Agent Rains closed the session without drama. "This evidence package is already in multiple jurisdictions," she announced. "Any attempt to destroy, alter, or intimidate will be treated as obstruction." She didn't look at Preston when she said it. She didn't need to. Abigail Sutter added, "Witness statements are being taken today. If you have information, come forward now." Jonah's camera kept rolling, capturing the line that formed, slow at first, then longer. A woman from the diner stepped up, hands shaking, and whispered something to Morgan. A retired deputy approached, face pale, and asked to speak to Rains privately. Grant Hollis stood frozen at the edge, then swallowed hard and walked forward, his shoulders sagging in surrender. Travis watched the line and felt a strange, quiet ache. This was what truth looked like when it began to thaw. Messy, late, painful, necessary. When the crowd thinned, Travis stepped away from the table and walked to the edge of the frozen lake. The surface was smooth and bright, reflecting sky like a promise. He knelt, gloved hands absent because he wore no gloves, and pressed his bare palm to the ice. It was cold enough to sting. He deserved the sting. He thought of the times he'd been ordered to ignore signals that didn't fit the mission. The times he'd told himself silence was discipline. He thought of the carved warning in the gold, and how it had aimed him like a compass toward a truth he'd avoided. Riven came to his side and stood close, tan vest brushing Travis's sleeve. Travis rested his hand on the dog's collar, feeling the simple hardware that had never lied to him. "You didn't let me walk past it," Travis murmured. The dog's eyes stayed forward, alert and steady, as if the wood still held unfinished sentences. Travis understood then what the story had been teaching him from the beginning. The miracle wasn't a voice in the air or a light in the sky. The miracle was a loyal animal's insistence, a refusal to accept a human's convenient blindness. The investigation would continue after today. Rains would pursue warrants. Auditors would pull chains. Names would rise out of old files like bones from thawing ground. But what mattered right now was simpler. The town had seen the evidence in daylight. It had been copied, stamped, and placed in too many hands to vanish quietly. Preston could still smile, he could still threaten, but he couldn't unsee the line of people stepping forward. Travis stood and looked toward the tree line where the hidden watcher had disappeared. Riven's ears angled that way too, posture mission ready, facing the same direction as Travis. There was still something out there, someone, some machine, some legacy, that hadn't finished trying to control the story. Travis didn't feel triumphant. He felt clean in a way he hadn't felt in years. Not innocent, but honest. He had answered the pull of the vault with the only weapon he trusted now. Not violence, not secrecy, truth, duplicated until it became unkillable. Sometimes we think a miracle has to look like thunder in the sky or a voice that stops the world, but more often God's mercy comes quietly, in ordinary moments we almost walk past. A warning that won't leave your mind, a truth that keeps resurfacing, a loyal companion who senses what you can't and refuses to let you keep pretending everything is fine. In this story, the miracle wasn't the gold or the shock of what was hidden. The miracle was the courage to step into the light and tell the truth cleanly, without hatred, without chaos. It was the strength to choose integrity when silence would have been easier, and it was the reminder that God can use the smallest, wordless signs to guide a human heart back to what's right. Sometimes through a dog's unwavering instinct, sometimes through a stranger's timely help, sometimes through the quiet conviction that you were made for better than fear. And that connects to everyday life more than we realize. We all carry things we don't talk about. We all face moments when it's tempting to stay quiet, to let "that's just how it is" become our excuse. But God doesn't waste pain, and He doesn't abandon the people who are trying to do the right thing. He brings light step by step, and He gives you what you need for the next step. Wisdom, restraint, courage, and the right people at the right time. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt God guiding you through a small moment that didn't feel big at the time, but changed everything later? I read your comments, and this community grows stronger when we learn from each other. And if you want more K9 and Navy SEAL stories filled with courage, loyalty, and faith, please subscribe to K9 and SEAL Stories and stay with us. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. May God bless you and your family, and may He protect you in storms you can't see coming, comfort you in losses you didn't choose, and lead you day by day into peace, truth, and strength. Amen.